Hello everyone, Andy Grant here. So as you know, we've had a bit of a break from getting guests on, but now we are back. And I can't think of a better way, to be honest, of getting someone really cool on, and that's Oli France. Now, Oli is an adventurer. He takes teams all over the world to some of the most craziest and scariest and wildest places, going from the lowest point in North America to the highest point. He's also been to the lowest point in Africa to the highest point. And in January, he will be going to the lowest point in South America to the highest point in South America. He's an unbelievable guy. He's guided teams all over the world on crazy expeditions. Honestly, you're going to love it. Here's Oli France. So, Oli, you are the first guest I've kind of got back in, having had a bit of a break. And what a guest to start with. I mean, your story is absolutely incredible. Even when we were chatting a couple of days before, you kind of just give other things that I wasn't even aware of. I mean, this could be like a 10-hour podcast if we wanted it to be. But the main reason was you are the first person to go from Death Valley to Denali, correct?
This century. One guy did it in the 90s. I'm the
Really?
Yeah. It's been attempted several times since, but I'm the first person this century.
I mean, and let me get this right, it's a 3,556-mile trip.
Yeah.
I mean, and then again, before we get into it, how I came across your story is we've got a mutual friend, Ryan, who you asked to come on the trip.
Yeah.
That one bit of it. So that's our connection. But again, before we get into all this, just some of the things which we may or we may not come on to. You've had a gun pulled on you in Iraq. You've climbed the highest mountain in Iraq. You've been to, when you were in Lebanon at 20, there was an explosion a mile away. I mean, you've been in Tibet, negotiated with armed tribes in Ethiopia. You've found dinosaur footprints in, Tajikistan. Partying in Iran, Singapore machete stories, Somalian boat trips, being spied upon in Uzbekistan. I mean, it seems like quite the life you've had, mate.
I know it almost sounds like a complete load of nonsense when you read that out. Like, who's this guy making up all these stories? But it has been a wild ride. I mean, that is sort of what I've devoted my life to, is going out to these more unusual destinations around the world, and got into sort of guiding people, so taking people out there, all kinds of people from ordinary walks of life. And I think what I've found is, if you're going to places where not many others are going, and trying to do hard things, difficult things, as much as you plan, you never quite know what's going to unfold. And sometimes it is those wild, unexpected moments which have been the best stories and the best experiences along the way.
And I guess what your career now was, not only an adventurer, but also as a speaker as well. It's those stories that, as a speaker, you can kind of get the imagination going as well, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and some of them are funny, some of them are scary, but it's definitely, they're all something a bit unusual for the audience to hear about.
Yeah, not half. Right, so let's get into it properly then. So I came across you, like I just said, my friend Ryan. So you approached Ryan to help you with the Denali aspect of the challenge.
Yeah.
So initially you're going to cycle from Death Valley, which is the lowest point in America, to almost the base of Denali. And then that's where my friend Ryan came in and helped with the expedition side of it.
Yeah.
So doing this, I mean, where did this idea come from? I know it's part of a bigger plan, isn't it? Which is the plan to travel from the lowest to the highest on each continent.
Yeah.
What's the term of that called?
So I've named it the Ultimate 7 Project. You've got 7 continents, 7 mountains, 7 separate expeditions.
And this was just your idea?
Yeah, so this is, I've all along throughout these years of sort of last 15 years doing these expeditions had like a bucket list of top expeditions, and some of them kind of fizzled away. Some of them you get to a point and you think, it's too risky, it's too dangerous, or I don't really want to do it. But this was at the absolute top of the list, this idea. So I'd spent my life kind of staring at maps, studying the world, and I thought, what could I do which nobody's ever done before, which is, it's geographically interesting because you're at the lowest point and the high points. It would take me through all different types of terrain, be very, very hard. And this was kind of the ultimate project that I could come up with. And for about 10 years, I thought about this project. And like sometimes, I'd forget about it and then I'd go back to it and do a bit more planning. And so, to just sort of set the scene of what it is, as you say, it's going from the lowest point in each continent to the highest by human power. So 7 separate expeditions across all 7 continents, which will involve about 15,000 miles of human-powered travel on foot, by bike, on ski, even rowing on one section. And so I I think one of the most daunting things with something like this is actually putting it out into the world, because this had been swimming around my head for 10 years, and about 18 months ago, finally put it out into the world. And in a way, that gives you a bit of accountability, doesn't it? Because now you've got pressure. You've got people looking at you. You've said you're going to do it. And so I had to actually, get myself together and get it organised. And so last summer did the Africa leg, which had challenges in itself, particularly with hostility, temperatures, wild animals. But it was the North America leg this year, which was always going to be one of the real big challenges.
Just on that, you're saying again, I'll bring up Ryan again. I always remember when I attempted to break that 10K record.
Yeah.
And Ryan messaged me in the weeks beforehand, and he said, I hope you fucking break this record now, because you're going to look like the biggest fucking idiot if you don't. So there is that accountability, isn't it?
Yeah.
And a good pressure to think, right, I've said it now, I need to do it.
100%.
So if I can take you back then, your lifestyle, it comes like ex-military, or was there ever aspirations to join the military? Where did this kind of outdoor, adventurous, attitude come from?
Yeah, it's a common question I'm asked, and it was definitely one of the things in my mind as I was going through my teens. And I think like most teenagers, you're trying to figure out what you want to do. I always loved being outside. I wanted to be outside constantly. Played a lot of traditional sports growing up, football and rugby. We had a very, very good rugby team at school. We got to the national finals a couple of occasions. And so even from the age of sort of 12, playing at the Millennium Stadium, and we were being coached by the guy who's now the England Rugby League coach, Sean Wayne. And so I think from a young age, I was used to being in that high pressure, sort of high performance environment, and being coached and having good mentors, which I'm very grateful for. But I think I sort of lacked a bit of direction, and actually went rock climbing for the first time at the age of 17. And just instantly, having been told throughout my entire childhood, no, don't do this, don't do that. Now I'm being told, go and climb that rock face, which is just really exciting. And so that just stuck, and I just thought, I want more of this. Mm-hmm. So I signed up to an outdoor leadership degree, which is a proper degree course. It just meant 3 years of fun, basically, going down to North Wales, learning how to climb, mountaineer, kayak, canoe. The military was always something on my mind. I think more and more, though, as I was going through university, I liked to really do my own thing. And so I managed to get a bit of funding. I went and travelled out to Morocco. The following year, I went out to Beirut at the age of 20, living with a local family for a month. Nobody's going there, definitely not at my age. But I loved kind of being out in these environments, even from that age, just figuring everything out, figuring out my way around difficult situations, and just kind of having that freedom. And I think I lent more into that and ended up following that path. I'm sure I'd have loved it in the military, so many things, because it would have really suited me. But I suppose I just found this alternative path.
Listen, it sounds just as exciting, if not more exciting, to be fair, your path. And when you kind of, at an early age, how are you kind of funding this? Is there kind of a long-term goal of thinking, I need a job doing X, Y, and Z to fulfill this? How are you at a young age? Because I think it is such a big problem when you're young, isn't it? Kind of trying to balance your passion, but also thinking, I probably should actually grow up now and get a proper job. How did you kind of manage that in the early days?
100%. And this is a job where there's no blueprint for it. No careers advisor is going to tell you, right, this is what you need to do. And even if you look online, nobody's going to tell you how to become an adventurer, an expedition leader, and actually make that into a career. So in the early years, I spent so much time figuring out how to get funding. So as I said, at university, they had a grant scheme. I became the only person in about 35,000 who got the grant 3 years running to go and travel overseas. And I just devoted so much more time to getting that grant than my actual degree. So that's all I cared about, was where can I go next summer? And then, further down the line, I was using Kickstarter campaigns. I was, speaking to local media, local schools, local businesses, really kind of at a grassroots level, just trying to get cash together and then doing things on a budget. But yeah, I did take a detour into the corporate world after university, went traveling for a year in Australia, New Zealand, got back to the UK, kind of checked the bank balance. Now I'm in my early 20s thinking, okay, maybe it is time to grow up. And, everybody's telling you at that age, I'll go and get a real job. So I did, and I fell into this corporate world for about 2 years for a kitchen manufacturer. First, that was, obviously I was very, very miserable. because it was not suited to me. I remember day one on the job. I was not far from here, actually, on the outskirts of Liverpool, going into this this kitchen manufacturer made kitchens for social housing projects. And so I met my colleague for the first time, and the very first word she said to me was, "Oh, in a few weeks you'll be as miserable as I am." I thought, I'm like, amazing. So, I spent a year like designing kitchens. Then I was moved into sales. Spent a year trying to sell kitchens without any success whatsoever. Literally in that year, didn't sell a single kitchen, other than the one I sold to myself. How I actually stayed in the job for a year is like a miracle in itself. But eventually realised, I'm probably going to get sacked if I don't leave the job anyway.
Just knowing what I know of you, it seems impossible. I mean, I only know you from Instagram and from, what I've heard about you. I just can't imagine how you lasted 2 years.
Oh, that I've said it before, but this is like my greatest endurance feat. Was sitting in that job for 2 years. And the reality of it was, on paper, it's a good job. You've got bonus scheme, salary, company car, laptop, blah, blah, blah. Looks great on paper. But I would spend my waking hours like lethargic, lying in bed, demotivated. The only thing I'd look forward to was like my daily run or gym session. That was my outlet. And so I needed to get out. So, looking back, I was a shell of who I am now, like an absolute shell. And I could feel sort of my passion just draining away from me.
That must happen to so many people, by the way, as well.
Yeah.
I had an interesting, similar to one as well. I was a bit younger. I remember doing work experience, and I think year 9 or something it might have been. And it was, again, not far from here in Bootle. And it was just a guy sitting in an office, putting in numbers all day. And I kind of just said, it was probably a little bit disrespectful at the time, but I was only young and didn't know better. And I just said, is this all you do, like, every day?
Yeah.
To this guy in his 40s. And he said something that always stuck with me. And he said, well, every job gets boring unless you're a lion tamer. And I thought, I don't think every job is as boring as this is every single day. And I don't think you need to go to the extremes of being a lion tamer either. So it's funny, isn't it, at an early age, how someone can almost inspire you to not be like that and actually, thankfully, set you off on a different pathway.
Yeah, thankfully. And I always had a sense of that as well, like you did. And I remember having a conversation with somebody at a young age who was saying, well, why is society making us work 9 to 5s and drive through 2 hours of rush hour traffic to get to work and sit in an office all day? And I just remember thinking to myself, society's not telling you to do that. You're deciding to do that. We have a choice.
Yeah.
We have a choice. And, it's not slave labor. Nobody's forcing you to be there and do that. But I think people, and it's understandable because there's a lot of social pressure. People end up falling into these paths which actually they have no interest in. They don't excite them. And for me, I always kind of wanted to reject that and wanted to kind of break the norm in my own personal way. I'm not bothered about the greater reaches of it. It's just I want to try and live an exciting, interesting life. And I had that sense from quite a young age.
And I think as well, you bang on. I think definitely society will put certain pressures on you and stuff to kind of, jump into the mould, really. But by taking the path you've done, it creates a whole different set of pressures. You've got a young family. Again, it's pressures of finance and trips. And, so it's kind of, pick your medicine, really, I guess, isn't it? Pick which kind of stress you want to have in your life. And I think the stress that you've kind of put yourself under over time, can't wait to hear about it. So this idea of the 7 continents, I've heard of the term, the Grand Slam, which is just going to the top of each mountain. I'm sure you'd heard of that before. When did you then start? Was it in your 20s? How old are you now?
I'm 34. 34, yeah.
So for anyone who's listening, the term the Grand Slam is going to the top, the highest mountain on each continent. You've obviously then kind of made your own one up. Is this come in your 20s, this idea, and you've just sat on it? Where did the adaptation of it come as well?
Yeah, so it was something I came up with. I think very first one I came up with was the Oceania leg, which is kind of the continent that everyone forgets about. But I was trying to plan the ultimate expedition, the most sort of wild, hard challenge. And that one in itself, it would involve a 2,000-mile cycle across the desert. It would involve a 600-mile row, which nobody's ever done before, 150-mile jungle trek, and a big mountain climb at the end.
Is that Carsten's Pyramid?
Carsten's Pyramid, yeah. So you've got desert, ocean, jungle, and mountain you've got cycling, on foot and rowing all wrapped up in one world first expedition. And this one I'd just come up with kind of out of the blue, and that one really excited me as something, it's so hard, so logistically challenging, but very exciting. And then I sort of took that concept and had a look at the other continents and started to work out, what would Asia look like, or what would North America look like, and South America. And the more I looked at each one, I'm like, they all sound good, actually. And of course, committing to something which is a multi-year project across all 7 continents, which would be very expensive, very hard, very risky, is quite daunting. But I got to the point where I felt like I was entering cruise control again, basically, and I wanted to really start to push things. And so, as I said, it was about 18 months ago that I committed to actually take it on.
Wow. And I'm just trying to think even where to start, because I've done a few expeditions myself. I've thankfully not had to plan them. I've just turned up almost and done it. I mean, so 18 months ago, you actually committed to it.
Yeah.
I mean, what kinds of decisions you have to speak? You've got a wife as a partner, is it?
Yeah.
2 young kids. I mean, what is, on a really kind of personal level, on a first thing sorted, I mean, what does that conversation go like with your missus? Look, I want to embark on doing this challenge over the next 10 years. I mean, how does that conversation even go?
I
think that's sometimes what people forget. It's great seeing you on the top of the mountains, but it's a family decision, I guess, isn't it?
It is. I think, for me, I've always been trying to, over the last few years, each year sort of incrementally, and each expedition is just push things a little further. But equally, once I had children, I've now got 2 young children. Before having children, I was going off on 10 to 15 expeditions a year, 10 to 15 countries a year, all over the world, like non-stop, really high pace, but I knew I couldn't keep up that. And so what I wanted to focus on instead was real high quality trips that were going to move the needle in my career. At the end of the day, I built a career doing this, and I want to become the best version of myself within that sort of job. And this isn't about like comparing or competing. This is about my own personal journey to do something really hard and challenge myself. And this was the idea that I'd always sat on. And, I think this was the conversation that I had to have with my wife, is that, I could continue in cruise control, run a few trips here and there, maybe make an okay living, but have to do other things as well. Or I can really try and push things. I can really try and pioneer. And I think it's only through doing that you can, build your actual career, get those bigger brand sponsors involved, make those other income streams, actually build this into something bigger than just you.
Yeah.
And I think a second motivation, which is the single thing that I thought about more than anything on my last expedition, was I want to try and be a positive role model and an inspiration to my 2 young children. I didn't have that role model growing up. I did have great parents, which I was very lucky for, but in my world, I had nobody to look up to. But every single day on this expedition, which again I'm sure we'll talk about, but I remember thinking, whenever it got hard, the thing that convinced me to carry on was I'd imagine a future conversation with my 2 young children and said, look, I had a dream once and I tried it, but it was too hard, so I just gave up. And the thought of having that conversation with my children was so unthinkable that I had to carry on. So that's become a big motivation, is really trying to inspire them that, I'm a failed kitchen salesman from Wigan. Like, let's get it in perspective. What right do I have to go and do something like this? But I'm willing to give it a try.
What a motivation that is, though. I mean, because again, I think every parent wants the kids, wants to be a positive role model, and I think, that motivation will always be there, won't it?
Yeah.
When it comes again to a big trip like this, you said before about sponsors and things like that. These things aren't cheap. I mean, you've already got an established name. You've already, been on some unbelievable adventures. How do those first days look at trying to secure funding for a trip like this?
Yeah, well, I mean, really, it's first months because it is absolute grind. And you often, people look at sort of people who get sponsorship and just think, oh, amazing, like getting loads of gear, getting loads of funding. It's a graft. Like, it's an absolute graft. It's really, really hard work. And although I had done expeditions, I'd never really had a big focus on social media, and lots of people sort of are more interested in your socials. But I knew that this was a special project, so I just had to back myself. And so it was a case of networking and trying to put myself out there to as many companies as possible, and everybody's saying no or not getting back to me.
And why this? I mean, is it because no one's ever heard of this before? I mean, what's the reason why initially people are maybe rejecting that? the idea?
I think that the scope and scale is, it seems maybe so improbable. I'm talking about something which is multiple years. They don't know me. They don't know my level of passion. They don't know my experience. Of course, you're trying to tell them that. You're trying to convey that. But it's hard to convince people of backing that dream.
Yeah.
And also, these people within marketing, say in an outdoor brand, they're getting dozens, if not hundreds of requests every month. They're inundated with requests for sponsorship, for clothing, for kits. And it's how do you cut through that noise? And so it's an iterative process. I'm listening to feedback. I'm trying to develop my pitch, I suppose, getting knocked back. And it's so, it's so mentally taxing because it's just constant rejection. And you're thinking, oh, what am I doing this for? And then eventually, after months and months, I had one cycle brand saying, okay, we'll give you some cycle clothing, we'll promote you on our social. And then the next one was Canada Goose. And that was, that was an amazing moment because that was this huge brand, billion-dollar brand. I'd almost given up. I'd found the chief marketing officer of Canada Goose on LinkedIn, and I shot a speculative message thinking, like, this is basically a waste of time. They're not going to get back to me. Sent it off, and within 15 minutes, they replied saying, I'm going to set up a call for you with my team. And she just, all it takes sometimes is for somebody to see that vision. She linked me with the team. I had a call a few days later. They said, yeah, we're all in. We're backing you. And they supported me on that first expedition across Africa. And then the ball was rolling. But that was months and months of effort to get there.
It's one of my pet hates, to be honest, and one of the reasons I stopped getting guests on the podcast for a while. Listen, it's part of our lives, we have to do it, but I hate social media in a sense that, and I sound like a hypocrite because I use it all the time, but what I mean is, I'm fortunate enough to know some really cool people who have done some amazing things. You're in that kind of list, that category. And I sometimes see people's social medias, and because a lot of these people are very humble, they just go about the thing because it's what they're passionate about. They maybe don't get the recognition. And in society these days, we've got people who, you look at the Hawk Tour girl who, in a nightclub, I'm sure she's a lovely girl, but you're thinking straight away she's got 1 million followers and she's got all these people aspiring to be like her. And I'm like, I know a lad who's just, climbed Everest with one arm. I know a lad who's just swam the channel with no legs. I know all these amazing people. I think socially you don't really get the recognition. And I guess for you as well, when you're then touting for sponsorship, they look at your socials and you're not kind of as big as they want you to be. It's tough, isn't it?
It is, and it is a frustration, and it doesn't come naturally to me at all. I've never enjoyed it. I remember for years and years I didn't have social media, and I was doing all these expeditions, and it was just for me, and I wasn't interested. And then the first big expedition, I had so many people telling me, "Oh, you should get that on social." Eventually, I set up this Instagram page, started sharing it. People were interested in things. But I remember the very first post was really scary. Although I was doing these sort of hard, dangerous things, for me, putting something out there into the world was a bigger fear at that time. Because I think it is scary to put yourself out into the world, isn't it? And put yourself on this pedestal. And I think now, I agree with you. I all of the sort of the adventurers, the explorers, the people in my world that I respect the most and that I think are the most accomplished, none of them really have, huge social media followings. They're very, very humble. They don't like shouting about it. And for me, that's an admirable trait, is that sort of humility. But at the same time, you've got to play the game.
Exactly.
Yeah, you've got to play the game. So you've got to balance it.
No, I'm 100% with you on that. So 18 months ago, you get the kind of sponsorship then to start the Africa trip. That's the first leg. So before we get on to Denali, which I'm really interested in because I've got a few friends who've done Denali as well. How did the Africa trip go then? And where's the lowest point to start with? And obviously up Kilimanjaro to finish. But where did that start?
So lowest point is a place called Lac Assal in Djibouti, which you might be familiar with Djibouti. I know
never been, no.
Okay,
don't know much about it.
All right, well, it's a little country on the Red Sea. It's got a place called Lac Assal. I know that sort of the British military have involvement there because of Somali pirates, and so I didn't know if there was a link. But funnily enough, it's one of the poorest countries in Africa. But through a mutual contact, I was really struggling to get a good link out there, a good contact. I always like to have a good personal contact, or a fixer, or a local guide who can just give you information and help you out in country. And the guy I found was the guy who was only introduced to me as Mr. Djibouti. And he said, this guy,
name.
yeah, Mr. Djibouti. And he apparently is the guy to know in Djibouti. And so I started exchanging emails, and I saw his real name, and I searched for him. I found nothing. And he said, look, if you want a helping hand, you can come and stay with me when you arrive. I said, I've got 12 bedrooms, so it shouldn't be a problem. So now I'm thinking, wow, who is this guy? And
Mr. Djibouti is big time.
Mr. Djibouti is big time. And so flew out there, landed in Djibouti. His driver had met me near the passport control, escorted me through passport control in what's actually quite a strict police state, into his big black SUV, drove out next to the president's house in Djibouti to this 12-bed mansion in its own grounds with a courtyard, swimming pool, gardeners, everything. So now I'm thinking, who the hell is this guy? Because I've still not met him, still not even seen a picture of him, just exchanged emails. And so got put up in this mansion. And then the following morning, I finally met Miss Djibouti, who's a French guy, actually. Slick, sweat-back hair, tans, shirt open, suave, sort of wanders down into the kitchen in the morning. The previous night, he'd been hanging out with the CIA and the American embassy. Very, very well connected, really influential. And so he became my fixer.
Wow.
And it was just amazing having this person on my side then. And he was introducing me to people in the UN, and I was also looking for a good contact in North Africa. And I'd spent months trying to find. And I know a lot of people now who are well-traveled, and usually I can find a good fixer quite easily. But I'd really struggled in northern Kenya, which is very tribal and a bit dangerous. I told this to Mr. Djibouti, and within 5 seconds, he was on the phone. He'd found the guy. He passed me his details. He'd then passed me 3 more details, and it was all done within seconds. And so this is a guy of real influence. And so, then the following morning, his driver took me out to La Casale, which is also one of the hottest places in Africa. It's about 45 degrees when I was there in the summer. Extremely hot. And I'm sort of fresh from the UK, just a few days out. So now going into one of these exceptionally hot places. The first day I had to cycle about 65 miles all uphill to the Ethiopian border.
And what was the actual distance from the start to finish in Africa?
So it's about 1,600 miles. Wow. So it's quite a long journey, which would take me through Djibouti, Ethiopia, Kenya to northern Tanzania and Kili. And so got to sort of that first day, unbelievable heat, like banging headaches. I must have drunk 9-10 litres of water. I had 1 pee all day, which is like a little dribble of black coffee. And so really dehydrated. My entire body's covered in salt, which I'd sweated out. I got to the end, banging headache. I look at my map, and I've done that much. I've got 1,600 miles left to go. Then I entered Ethiopia. Ethiopia was a concern. I'd traveled twice there before, and every time I'd had problems. Very, very tribal country.
And it's just on your own, no one else?
So Ethiopia, just as I was arriving there, it went into a state of national emergency because you had a lot of intertribal fighting, a lot of clashes. So I was cycling by myself, but I decided to get a support driver in Ethiopia because I was concerned. And as I was saying, I had travelled there twice before, and both times I had problems. Once I was taking a group out there. We were on a coach, and we were surrounded by an armed mob, which was a bit sketchy. They all had machetes. And
I love all that when you're planning this trip. That is not even a concern. Last time I was here, son, it was, who cares? Come on, let's go.
Yeah. And if you read any account of someone cycling through Ethiopia, they're getting stones thrown at them, they're getting pushed off a bike. So it was a worry. Ethiopia, very briefly, was the only country in Africa which was never colonized. Which is quite incredible, very mountainous, very tribal. And so I knew I could face problems. So I got the support driver. I did face a lot of hostility. Really? So I had people chasing me. I had people throwing rocks at me. I had someone throw a knife at me. One of the sketchiest moments was cycling down a steep hill, with this quite heavy bike going pretty fast. And a guy came out of the bushes with, one of those crooked knives that they use for cutting grass. And he stood there on the roadside holding it as though he was going to try and chop my head off.
Wow.
And just as I was going past, he did this little smirk as though it was a joke. I just thought, you fucker. But, my heart's going like this. And so, yeah, there was a lot of sketchy moments. I was glad to have a support driver in this Land Cruiser who could just chase people away. That said, did have a lot of great interactions too. But it was very, you cycle along and every single town you're going through, you're getting people shouting at you. And it's just exhausting, absolutely exhausting. And you do feel vulnerable just sat there on a bike.
Where were you sleeping in the night? Was it in a tent or B&Bs, little home-type hostels?
I wanted to sleep in a tent, but Ethiopia is so densely populated. It's, I think, the second most populated country in Africa. And so I didn't stop once, not for a pee, not for anything, without getting surrounded by people. Yeah. And so the idea of camping out there, unless you want to be absolutely hassled and intimidated and whatever, it's just not going to happen. So I found little shacks and little shelters and homestays, and very, very basic, but that's where I was staying.
Wow. And this was all cycling then to get to the foot of Kilimanjaro, was it?
Yeah, that was all cycling. Then entered northern Kenya. Now I'm entering a very sort of dry, dusty area, doing big distances. And then I'm sort of worrying about lions and other animals. And I did encounter sort of giraffes and hyenas and ostriches.
Really?
Which was pretty cool, yeah, to cycle alongside. But definitely the big fear was lions, because I was cycling through lion country on my own. But I met the Maasai, because I had a red bike and red bags. The Maasai all dressed in red. And they said, oh, you'll be safe because because you're in red, and the lions have learned to fear red. So that was my only defense, the fact I had a red bike, which wasn't very reassuring, because I read the night before I was going through lion country, and I made the mistake of reading on my phone, what should you do if you get attacked by a lion? Turns out there's basically nothing you can do. you just got to accept it. Anyway, eventually made it into Tanzania and did climb Kili. It was the fourth time I'd climbed Kili at that point, so the mountain wasn't a major concern. But the cycle was the big challenge on that one.
And how many days did that take in total?
I was about 26 days. Yeah, start to finish.
You would have thought it would take a lot longer, wouldn't you? Well, I don't know, when you think you're going from the lowest point to the highest point.
Yeah. I was pushing hard, so I was doing about 95 miles a day. There was a lot of climbing. Ethiopia in particular is really mountainous, so I was probably doing 1,500 meters a day on average at climbing, plus 95 miles on a heavy bike. So I was really pushing hard, and then Kili doesn't take too long. But I wanted to. Yeah, I wanted to sort of push it and try and go fast.
That's another big thing I respect, and I sound like I'm bloody moaning here as I'm getting older, but I can't stand when people do stuff. I know you haven't done it for the charity in that sense, but when someone says, I'm going to run a half marathon, or they're jumping out of a plane's the big one.
Yeah.
And I think, God, you want me to pay you to jump out of a plane? Like, I love doing stuff like that, or,
yeah.
God, you're running a half marathon. You've done that last Sunday for me, breakfast type thing.
Yeah.
I like it when people are not only doing stuff, but they're doing it punchy. Like, you're like, I'm not just going to do this. I want to, smash it out, 100 miles a day type thing. I think
style matters.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it is an unbelievable challenge, but if you kind of went about it and it took you 6 months, you're doing it in 20 odd days. I mean, that's the thing where I think, this guy's not fucking about, you know what I mean? I think that says a lot as well.
Yeah.
There's so many challenges, I think, where you think you could do them. Like, you hear about people running consecutive marathons, but if they're running a marathon in 8 hours, whereas you're doing them in 3-hour marathons every day, it's a big difference, isn't it?
Oh yeah, totally. And I think that is, in the world I sort of entered into, in this world of adventure, you are judged on the style in which you do things.
Yeah.
It's almost like Olympic divers or whatever.
Yeah.
It's the style matters.
No, I get it.
You are judged on it.
And Kilimanjaro as a mountain, I've not done that myself. But again, I've attempted to do very briefly. I've got a friend, Martin Hewitt.
Yes, met him. You met him in Talca.
Oh, of course you did, yeah, of course, yeah. So he's part of a group that's called the Adaptive Grand Slam, who's trying to get disabled people up the top of each mountain on each continent. So with him, I've done Aconcagua.
Oh, nice.
And, I didn't do it. We stopped 200 metres short because it was too dangerous, but we attempted it at least. And he's done all of them. I have not done Kili. He has, as a mountain, what's that like?
So it's, first of all, the scale of this mountain is huge. I mean, like the width of it. If you look at it, a satellite image, from one end to the other, it's over 100 miles. And this is just one mountain. So that's one thing which people sort of don't think about, because it's a volcano. Yeah. It's almost 6,000 meters. And you're at the foot of the hills, you're in down sort of 900 meters. So you got a lot of elevation of 5,000 meters up to the summit. On the lower parts of the mountain, it's all jungle. So you're starting off through jungle, past monkeys. Then you get up into the higher reaches, which is sort of dusty, rocky. And then by the time you're on the summit, you've got glaciers and snow. So it's probably one of the only few climbs on the world where you started in jungle and you finish next to glaciers. Yeah. You do have good support teams, so you can't step foot on Kili without guides because of permits. It's quite regulated. But they add a lot to it. And so there's a lot of singing, dancing, and every day is quite different. It is challenging. It's often known as the world's most underestimated mountain.
I was going to say, not to be disrespectful of the mountain, but I've always thought, I think because you see a lot of celebs doing it for comic relief, it gives that feel of it's not a proper mountain, which is maybe a bit wrong.
Yeah. I mean, and I think I went into it with thinking that as well. I think the thing that catches people out is on day 5 or 6, depending on when you summit, you're already up at almost 6,000 meters, and that's pretty fast in terms of getting up to that altitude. So the altitude hits people big time, and I've taken about 50 people up Kili now. Some of them have been like serious CrossFitters, marathon runners, ultra marathon runners, ex-military, and most of them have come out of it and said it's the hardest thing they've done the summit day. Yeah, so it is hard. People really struggling big time.
And do you struggle with altitude, or are you okay?
I think I've learned how to cope with it a bit better, but certainly sometimes it still gets you. Altitude is a killer. Yeah, it's a real killer.
So once you get to the top, then at Kili, it's that's the first of the 7 done. I mean, what's the feeling like now? Is it kind of I've bitten off a bit more than I can chew, or is it like right there and go right? Let's plan the next one. I mean, what's the kind of feeling like once you get to the top?
I think that the first thing was I felt empowered because I was saying I was going to do this thing, and until you've done it, you don't really know if it's possible, because only, I think, 2 or 3 people have done that Africa challenge before me. Not very well documented, so I'm basically researching the whole thing from scratch. I don't know if it's possible, and particularly during the rides, there have been a lot of dangers, and I've been unsure whether it was possible. But when I'd finished it, it's like, okay, great, like one's done now. I've proven the concept. I can go back to the sponsors. I can tell them it's been a success. You got a little bit of press out of that, which was great, including an article in the Times, which I was really happy with. And so that sort of proved the concept. And I think I felt empowered, but I did know in the back of my mind that could prove to be the easiest of the 7, and that things are only going to get a lot harder from there.
Okay, so you get back from Africa. When does the planning then start, or had the planning already started for the second leg?
So Death Valley to Denali, I'd been thinking a lot about that for the previous year. I'd actually put it out to Red Bull, and Red Bull were potentially interested in getting on board with it. Couldn't quite convince them, unfortunately. But so I'd done a lot of research, but I had to go straight back to the drawing board because I think one of the misconceptions that I've had is that people think, it's in North America, it's going to be pretty developed, it'll be pretty easy. Maybe I thought that myself as well until I really got into the planning, because all I'd ever done was trips to more remote and sort of poorer countries. This was my first ever expedition in a Western country. So I thought, that might be easy. But when you look at it, just to set the scene for what the challenge is. So you're starting, as you say, Death Valley, California, which is right down south in North America. You're then cycling 3,500 miles all the way up through the western states, into Canada, across British Columbia, Yukon, over into Alaska. Now you're in sort of deep winter by the time you get up there. 3,500 miles to reach the foothills of Denali. So that's a distance of London to Dubai, or if you were to go the other way, London to Washington, D.C. Just to put that in context, I'd be doing that solo and unsupported with all my gear on a bike weighing about 50 kilos. Then the crux of the expedition, or what I thought could be the crux, was 99% of people climbing Denali fly into the base camp via ski plane to essentially fly over the Kahiltna Glacier, which is the longest glacier in the Alaska range. But for me to do it human powered, we needed to ski into the base camp, and like nobody does that, or very, very few people do that. The best source of information I had was a guy who'd done it 20 years ago. And what that journey looks like is 120 kilometers. You're going over big foothills through avalanche terrain. You're crossing rivers. You're bushwhacking. You're climbing up onto a glacier, navigating 70 kilometers on a glacier with crevasses which could swallow a small skyscraper. Avalanches coming down. You're in bear country as well, so there's a high chance of seeing bears. And to do that it just in time to get to before the snow is melted, so you can still ski it, and then get to the base camp, which is where most climbers start from. And to set the scene for Denali itself, it's often known as the coldest, windiest mountain on Earth. The season before us, of the hundreds of climbers who'd attempted it, all of whom are experienced, only 30% of them had reached the summit. So the mountain itself, very, very hard, very cold, stormy. And to piece this all together in a very narrow time window, leaving Death Valley before it got too hot, getting to Alaska when I could still just about cycle on the roads, and then skiing in when there's still snow. It was a very, very tight margin. And I knew that I'd need to also, which we'll come on to, assemble a strong team. So a lot of planning went into this throughout the next few months.
So many working parts.
So many working parts, yeah.
I guess if you're going to kind of break it down, you've got the cycle across kind of the west coast of America.
Yeah.
Then the kind of undulating bit where it's a bit, and then the actual mountain itself. So if we start with the actual cycle bit.
Yeah.
I imagine that to be, and I remember seeing your Instagram actually at the time. I suppose that was quite enjoyable, just cycling through America. I mean, the initial hard bit, I'm assuming Death Valley was tough, but I mean, was the points where you just, just imagining the kind of west coast of California on your bike, thinking, this is great. I mean, did it feel like an expedition straight away? Did it always only later on?
Yeah, so it was funny because I went into it, you look at the journey as a whole, and you think the first bit of the cycle, particularly in like relatively okay temperatures up through like Nevada, California, Washington, is going to be the easy bit, But a few days in, my body is in absolute bits because I've got this really heavy bike. I'm already reaching about 2,500 meters in Nevada, up in snowy mountains, cycling through blizzards. I can barely walk in the morning because all my ligaments are swollen. My Achilles look like doubled in width. And I'm already falling behind schedule because I've got a really narrow sort of time frame to do it in. And by this point, I've told everyone I'm going to do it. I've had some press. I've got 10 sponsors on board. And I'm just like having serious doubts, and also knowing this is meant to be the easy part. So that, I definitely went into it thinking it would be easier than it would be. But if anything, I couldn't afford to rest, so I had to push harder. And so I think it took 2 or 3 weeks for me to start to physically adapt to the challenge.
And on that, then what was your training going into it then? Because even before it even starts, I'm thinking of the training I've done before some mountains. It's completely different cycling.
Yeah.
So, I mean, how did you even kind of, what was the training and prep for this challenge?
Yeah, it is completely different. But I think one of my big focuses was I knew I'd be spending so much time on the bike, which I did over the course of the weeks when I started cycling. I was doing about 50 hours sat on the bike every week. That's, pedals turning, that's not rests, which is a lot of volume. So the big thing in my training was doing as much volume as possible. So that was a mixture of hill running, cycling, gym stuff, but just getting out, trying to do at least a couple of hours a day, which is a stretch when you're doing all the sponsorship, all of the brand outreach, all of the team building, the finalizing of kit, the logistics, the family life on top of that. To squeeze in a couple of hours of training a day is quite demanding. So in a sense, that first phase of the expedition was almost a training for the rest of it as well. So there was a pain barrier where my body had to adjust over those first couple of weeks, because it's physically impossible unless you're an absolute fully funded Red Bull athlete or something to train 50 hours a week to really, really fully prepare.
And kit wise, what you start with on this kind of first days, what kit are you carrying on your bike?
Well, I'm carrying essentially everything I'll need for the entire ride, which...
Even stuff for the mountain as well, or just...
Not for the mountain, which would have been silly because we had, just for the mountain itself, we probably had 300 individual items each.
Wow.
Unbelievable amount of stuff. In the end, it was over 300 kilograms worth of gear that we were taking up onto the mountain. Because of the nature of it, you've got no support, you've got no porters, no Sherpas. We're carrying all of our stuff for 3.5 weeks. So all that mountain kit was separate. But I was carrying everything I needed for the bike, which meant basically catering for the hottest point in North America, Death Valley. So, short sleeves. But the more heavy stuff is all the cold weather gear, including studded tires, studded ice tires. I felt a bit ridiculous setting off from Death Valley with like studded ice tires strapped to my bike. Got a few strange looks, but and things like bear spray, tent, sleeping bag, gas.
You carry all that with you?
All that, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
How did you even cycle? How heavy was the bike?
Well, it was up to about 50 kilograms, which is, very silly. So a fast road bike these days is about 8 or 9 kilograms. So 50 was, particularly going up hills, and you get some of those hills, you're going uphill for 40 miles consistently because of the scale of the continent. Everything is bigger. And so it just grinds you down. You're not going anywhere fast unless you go downhill.
Yeah. And what you said there about getting funny looks? I mean, what are people saying to you when you're stopping in the evenings? I'm guessing you're staying in motels, are you, or something, or along the way?
Yeah, a mixture of motels and camping. One of the big surprises was I had very, very few human interactions.
Really?
Yeah, so that is a thing that's really surprised me and surprised others. But on this whole 3,500 mile journey, distance of London to Dubai, I did not pass through one single city, not a single city. It was all small towns, villages. So usually a day would go by and I might have one conversation with somebody.
That's got to be tough as well.
That was mentally tough. So sat on a bike for anywhere between 8 and 12 hours a day, you're just in your own head. And you spend a lot of time in your own head, which can be a dangerous place to spend time because you go through every emotion, you think about everything. You got a lot of time to think about doubts and, why you're doing this, missing family, how sore your body is, all the rest of it. So that was one of the big challenges for sure.
And in the evening, you're allowing yourself to have a beer and, in the evening and a bit of a chill, or is it kind of just...
I really couldn't afford to because, by the time I'd sort of got there, it was just a case of fire out a quick social media post, send a few messages to home, eat as much food as I possibly could, and then just sleep for as long as I could, do a bit of maintenance on the bike, wash my kit. So there's no time to chill. And again, that's the nature of the challenge I'd set myself. If I was to take my time, I simply wouldn't have made it. Wouldn't have made it.
It's an interesting one, that as well, because, again, you're really pushing the envelope, which is, admirable. But then I always think myself, nowhere near on your level, the amount of times I've done Snowdon, and you don't even stop to look around and enjoy it. You just kind of... Did you ever feel a little bit on these challenges where it's like, I wish I just took a moment and looked around and thought, wow, or did you manage to get a few of them, or...
Yeah, I did think that, and I passed a lot of amazing places, particularly once I got up to British Columbia and Yukon. These are like bucket list destinations. You're cycling through, huge snowy mountains, big glaciers tumbling down, frozen lakes, or grizzly bears, brown bears, loads of wildlife, and it was incredible. And I did really enjoy that. Once I got up there, I was, for me, that a place like that is what adventure's all about. So I did enjoy it. Sometimes thought it would have been nice to share it with someone, but I had to just take a few pictures and kind of just keep the pedals moving.
I guess as well, I'm imagining the pictures don't even do it justice as well about you.
No, just the scale of the landscape. You can't, to put it into context, there was one section I was doing in British Columbia, which was 330 miles between towns. So in that stretch, there's nothing. That's the distance of London to Edinburgh, and there's nothing. That's called the Serengeti of the North because you've got brown bears, black bears, moose, bison, wolves, mountain lions, elk, all these huge animals, lynx, and barely any people, no civilization, no infrastructure. You're cycling for 3 days to get to the next town. I mean, the scale of it is just off the charts. And you're looking at forests and mountains and thinking, probably nobody's been there still. North America is incredibly wild in a lot of parts.
Yeah, I think we forget, don't we? You think America, you just, all the big cities, you forget there's huge areas where of just nothingness going
Totally.
on. I think as well, one of the big things, I remember when I was sharing all your posts when you were doing this challenge, I just think it's very difficult for a human to just grasp these distances. And it's almost sometimes a little bit like talking about the universe when we say the stars so many light years away. It's when you're talking about how heavy the bike is, the distances, what you're doing.
Yeah.
When you just see a social media post and we're all guilty of just scrolling and you say, oh, there's Ollie, he's cycling it, you forget, actually, this guy is fucking, like, what he's doing. It's so hard to get that across, isn't it?
It is. It is really hard. And I don't think, and we talked about this as a team on the mountain after we got back, is as much as you post and as many videos and photos as you share, the only people who really know what it's like are the people who you were there with.
Yeah.
Because unless you've lived and breathed every minute of that person's experience, it's always going to be really hard. Yeah.
So how many days did it take you then from the cycling from the start until you actually caught up with the team?
So it was about 42 days of cycling. In that time, I had one forced rest day due to a bad blizzard on the roads, and then one actual rest day because I was absolutely done in one day.
2 rest days, that's it?
Yeah, 2 rest days. Yeah.
Wow.
which again, and I got there, by the time I'd finished the ride, I arrived at our meeting point with the team an hour before their flight landed. So this was the narrow margins I was playing with, because they were arriving on a fixed date, and I just had to get there, because then we were no rest, straight into sorting kit for the mountain.
That is insane.
Yeah.
Like how so many things had to just align for that to happen.
Oh, yeah, so many things. And I mean, I could have faced a week-long blizzard in Alaska.
Yeah.
I could have been waylaid. I could have had mechanical problems. I could have simply not been fit enough or get injured. But yeah, so many things that could have gone wrong.
So 42 days, did you say, of cycling?
Yeah.
And then it's a case of then ditching the bike, meeting up with the team.
Yeah.
On the team, like I said, I know one of the guys, Ryan, who was on it. How did you come about picking that team? Because you could kind of plan yourself for the cycling aspect of it. Now you're looking at the mountain. How, in the year or so prior to this, how did you go about picking a team? Because not only for what they can bring to it, but also personality-wise as well.
Yeah, that is one of the big challenges, because first, to set the scene for the challenge, again, you know that you're going to be off-grid for 3.5 weeks. You're going to be doing something very, very physically demanding. You're going to be remote. You're going to be taking big risks in very, consequential places. And so you need to really trust that team. They need to be fit and capable. And then from a practical level, they also need to be able to escape from normal life for 4 weeks, which is, not many people can do that. And so along with the skills and the experience, you're talking a very small pool of potential people. If you think in the UK, for example, there's not many people who are going to really fit that and can also make a really solid team. So I started to put the word out there and put the feelers out there, and I probably spoke to about 15 different people. And as I'm having these conversations, I'm thinking, are they really motivated to do it? Because I'd speak to a couple of people and they'd be like, oh yeah, that sounds nice. But I need more than that. That they need to be thinking, this sounds incredible. I really want to do that. So are they motivated for the right reason? Do they have the skills and experience to do it? And, are they a good person? Which is possibly the most crucial thing of all, because you could have super experienced, motivated people who just don't fit together, and it's just going to be a disaster. So are they people you can get along with? And so eventually, Ryan was somebody I met in Chamonix a couple of years ago, and you know him very well, of course, as well. And just instantly you think, I can trust this guy, really get on with him, super easygoing, super chilled, very, very capable and experienced, like 100%. I'd love to have him on the team. And he was the first person to commit, actually.
Really?
So I was thrilled. Yeah, I was really thrilled, because I thought, he's now going to be a great person to have with me, and then we can build a team around the two of us. And so continue putting the feelers out there. The next guy I got on board was a guy called Aaron, who I'd kind of, which sounds very weird to people. I hadn't met him in person, but we'd followed each other on social media.
Until the mountain?
And, until the mountain.
Wow.
Which is mental. And I would not recommend it. Normally I'd want to go out and do expeditions, but I'd followed him for a long time. I'd seen he'd done loads of big mountains, very, very capable skier, very, very fit. And so we started having conversations. We did a lot of virtual calls. And I just saw that he was also a very chilled guy, very relaxed, and he would be a great asset to the team. Also very, very experienced on steep terrain, very capable. He was a skier. He had his own personal ambition to ski down the mountain, so he was personally motivated. And a great photographer as well, so he got some amazing images. And then the next person I got was Mike Stevenson, who I think you also know.
Yeah.
And
I met him when I attempted to do the Lakeland 100, I think it was.
Yeah.
And the Lakeland 50 I attempted, I'm sure he was running on that.
Yeah. So he's big into his endurance. Yeah. He's done loads of cold weather, hard expeditions in Siberia, Mongolia, Norway, Sweden. Lots of big multi-day endurance challenges. Very, very humble. Holds a couple of Guinness World Records.
Again, it's like we said before, another guy who's just cool as fucking things he's done, but...
Yeah. Yeah, and you meet him, and he would never tell you any of this.
Yeah.
You know, but I'd known him for longer than anyone. I'd known him for about 5 years. And although he hadn't spent a ton of time in big mountains, the more I looked at this Denali expedition, a lot of it was skiing, hauling sleds in very, very cold environments. That's exactly what he's been doing on his expedition.
Comfortable with being miserable, I guess.
Yeah, comfortable with being miserable, and also very, very slick, you know, very, very meticulous, very well planned, very well drilled, and someone I can get along with. So that was the team that came together. We did a lot of group calls and reached a point where I thought, yeah, this is very, very strong team. Everyone's got their own skill sets, their own background, which are going to complement each other. And yeah, I could not have been happier with the team.
Yeah. I remember speaking to Ryan. He was just super excited to get it started.
Yeah.
So again, great. The guys fly in. You're able to now ditch the bike. You have what, one or 2 days to prep, getting ready for the next phase of it.
Yeah, essentially that, and probably 2.5 days. So it's straight into it. The guys had flown in with all the mountain gear, which, as I said, was like 300 kilograms. So they each turned up with like 4 huge duffel bags full to the brim. I'd had an American food sponsor who'd got on board, sent us a bunch of food, and so we were driving out to Costco, getting a load of extra food, and one of the concerns was bears, and planning around bears. And this is how weird America is, and sort of.
I think Ryan might have told you this story, yeah.
Is that I'd been concerned about brown bears, definitely, and thinking, do you need a gun, basically? And I'd met this person on Instagram in Alaska who just happened to say to me, oh, if you need a hand with any logistics, let me know. So I got in touch. She ended up helping us out, like sourcing local things, and we got some gear sent to her house. And then when I met her, she said to me, what about bears? And, do you need any stuff for bears? And I said, well, I was thinking, do we need a gun? And she said, well, I'd always carry one. She said, well, you can borrow mine if you want. Seriously?
Only in America.
Yeah, only in America. And then, the 4 of us turned up in her garage, and it's almost like some sort of underground gun dealer. She lays out all these guns and revolvers, and she's like, which one do you want? And so we were having a look at them. And
this was just a woman you met on Instagram?
Literally a woman we met on Instagram, and we borrowed her big beefy revolver with some big sort of specialist shells which are designed for bears.
Wow.
And so, yeah, and it was funny because it was so effortless and easy to get this thing. And then we went to their version of Go Outdoors, which is basically like a zoo, but all the animals in there are dead and stuffed. And so you got bears and frigging moose and everything littered around this place. But then in the big corner of it, you got crossbows, assault rifles, handguns, aisles and aisles of rounds. And we went in there, bought 50 bullets for this gun, bought it at the checkout, no problems at all. And then after that, we went to this liquor store to get some supplies. We didn't even want booze. But Mike, who's in his 40s, wanted to buy a bottle of water in this liquor store in North America. He got ID'd for a bottle of water because it was in a liquor store. So it's harder to get a bottle of water than like a gun and bullets in Alaska, which is just ridiculous.
And you wonder why there's so many issues in America, don't you?
Yeah, wild. Eventually we were kind of locked and loaded. We had our gun, we had a flare gun, we had bear spray, we had an electric bear fence, we had 300 kilos of gear, half of which was going to be flown into the base camp to meet us there. Mm-hmm. The rest of it we loaded up into sleds and rucksacks, which is what we'd be traveling with, and then went through all the other formalities, finalizing permits, organizing the ski planes, just making sure that nothing was being left as a chance, and we had absolutely everything that we needed.
This is the thing I'm interested in now, where kind of the nitty-gritty to it. So from that point then, up with the team, how far did you have to walk to get to base camp?
So that was 120 kilometers, and this was the part
that no one really does.
Nobody does that, and this was the part where there were so many unknowns. And so, as I said, my best source of information was this guy who'd done it 20 years ago. 20 years is a long time, and glaciers can melt, snow can melt, trees can grow, rivers can change. So he'd sent me his route, so that was kind of an approximate guide. And then I shared this with some of the ski plane pilots. So I thought they could be a good source of information because they're flying over all day long. So they had a look at our route and they said, I'd go this way instead. And so we altered it a little bit, eventually settled on an approximate route. And then we went back to the point where I'd finished my ride. So that was the end point of a ride. And then we're just left. And so,
Tell you what, just on that, though, there's so much pressure on yourself that you've just got these 3 guys and said, look, just have a little faith in me.
Yeah.
This is what we're going to do. I mean, did you feel at any point, as the leader, you're thinking, shit, lads, that's a lot of pressure, I think.
Absolutely. It is pressure because this is something that nobody goes out and does this. So it was a lot of pressure. I think that's where I and the team, they all brought their own planning in, but we just had to be so meticulous and have absolute attention to detail. I mean, to put into that context, what that looks like, we would have, multi-hour calls about pieces of kit. We once spent about 15 minutes talking about the optimum size of pan to take. And so this is like the attention to detail that we're having. And this is where having diverse experiences within the team was all really helpful. So that by the time we got to the start, we knew exactly what kit we needed. We knew the route we were going to take. We knew where the hard bits would be, roughly. And we were also, I think, of a mindset where we were willing to be adaptable. We had contingency days in place. We had contingency routes in place. And so it was kind of as well planned as it possibly could be. But still, you're setting off from there. Just a few days earlier, I'd been back in that place, and one of the last conversations I had was with a hunter who was just getting back from his snowmobile with like a couple of rifles slung over his shoulder. He said he'd just been out there and shot 3 grizzlies. So there's grizzlies all over this place is like alive with grizzly bears, and we're venturing off on our skis to reach this glacier. So yeah, it was again like another moment of kind of stepping into the unknown, and you just got to hope that you've done everything to prepare.
So straight away from when you're leaving, you're on skis straight away?
Yeah, straight onto skis, yeah. So we're starting at the snow line. And the snow is sort of marginal by this point because now it's early May, so the snow is sort of melting away a bit. It's quite slushy, quite deep. And you're kind of getting used to hauling this 35-kilo sled up and down hills, big heavy rucksack. And, you very quickly got to figure out how the team is going to work together. Particularly when you get to camp and you need to set up a couple of tents, you need to get the stoves dialed in, you need to get, figure out the logistics in the tent, what you're taking in there, drying kit, all these other little practicalities that you can't really discuss on a phone. You just got to find, and it takes a few days, I think, to really find a good rhythm, get efficient. We introduced like a rota system for the stoves. We all had our own little specialities and tasks, I suppose, and then we, day by day, we're getting more and more slick. And definitely spending a lot of our evenings kind of talking about what we could do better, what the challenge is going to be the next day, how can we be more efficient, constantly trying to evolve as a team.
And I guess at that point, you are not only in the middle of nowhere, but there's not another soul for miles and miles.
For 8 days, we didn't see another person. Yeah, nobody. Total wilderness. And just the scale of this place, it's like, if anyone's been to the Alps, the scale of our approach. It's like if you were in Chamonix, for example, and you set off up one of the glaciers that meets Chamonix, by the time you get to the base camp, you're like halfway down Italy.
Italy. I was thinking about like that.
Yeah.
And the temperature-wise, how are you dealing with them, with the temperature of a night?
Yeah, so at that point in time, the temperature wasn't too bad. So it was only getting down to about -5 in the lower foothills. We had sleeping bags to prepare for, the summit temperatures of -30. So at that point, dealing with temperatures wasn't too bad. If anything, we were wanting it to be colder because when the temperature's hovering around 0, things are getting wet. All your down gear is getting wet. Your socks and shoes are getting wet, and then drying that becomes a problem. So we were kind of looking forward to colder temperatures, as strange as it sounds, because that's a bit easier to manage.
And how was them kind of first few days then as you're heading up to base camp? I mean, obviously enjoyable. I mean, meeting the team. I mean, what was the kind of feeling like in the team?
Yeah, so it was. It felt like a proper adventure. It really did feel like a proper wild adventure. And after a few days, we'd skied over these foothills, and eventually we knew one of the real cruxes could be getting ourselves onto the glacier. The glacier, once you're on it, is essentially like the runway, which is going to take you to base camp. It's got a lot of crevasses, so it's got its own problems. But to get onto the glacier, you've got to cut through a load of bushes and brambles. Very, very, very dense, which with a heavy sled going downhill skiing with a rucksack on, is exceptionally difficult and very frustrating. We had to cross rivers. I remember for poor Mike, although he'd spent a lot of time on skis and he was very, very capable on cross-country skis and hauling sleds and very fit, we got to the top of this particular mountain pass, and now we were looking down this steep slope. We had trees off in the distance. He strapped his skis on, got 35 kilo sled, 25 kilos on the rucksacks, and this is his first ever time downhill skiing, off-piste in Alaska with all that stuff. You know, it's just farcical because we're all skiing downhill. As soon as you set off, the sled flies past you. That's like a pendulum. That spins you round. Then you're in deep melted snow, trying to stand back up. You go again for 15 meters, you fall over, and then you hit the bushes. Everything's getting tangled and caught on the lead, which leads to your sled. You know, you're
frustrated just thinking about it.
It is so frustrating. But, you know, we had to adopt this idea of cheerfulness amid adversity, which you'll know all about. And there was this one day where the night before, we'd crossed a river. We got to this river, you know, deep, fast-flowing river, absolutely freezing cold. We had to carry all of our gear across there. And just on the banks of this river, we'd found huge grizzly footprints, which are like the size of a dinner plate, and fresh grizzly poo as well. So I think we'd probably frightened this thing off as we'd hacked through the bushes. And so it was there, you know. And then we set our tent still with grizzly prints all around us. We had to fire off a few shots just to try and frighten this thing away. And then the following day, we covered only 3 kilometers, and it took us about 10 hours. It was just ridiculous. But you just had to just embrace it for what it is. By the end of that day, we'd navigated up onto the glacier, and then we could start to make a bit faster progress.
Wow. I mean, was there any point then where you're thinking, because again, you're not even really on the mountain properly yet, are you?
No.
Are there any points at this where you're thinking, I don't know whether we're going to actually make this? Because that sounds like a frustrating day.
It was a frustrating day. And I suppose you never know what's going to come next. But I think one of the things which I loved about this team was just the constant positivity. And so, you know, nobody said it out loud in terms of having any doubts that we were going to make it. And so we always backed ourselves. I think in the planning stages, we had, you know, these thoughts in our mind, is it actually possible? But I think once we were on the mountain, everybody was so like resolute in their mindset, so strong-minded, that we always just thought, we're going to do it. We're going to find a way. We're going to figure it out.
That's mega, isn't it, to know that you've got just 4 strong-minded people who are thinking, we're going to smash this.
Yeah.
The mountain itself, like I say, I know a few guys who've done it. Martin's done it a couple of times. I mean, all I've heard is, again, how cold it is and all the problems. I mean, when you're on the mountain proper, what was that like? Because, again, you've had so many changes these past 3 or 4 weeks before, and now you're on the mountain. That's extremely cold, carrying the pulk and everything. I mean, what's that like?
So Denali is a mountain that just grinds you down. You know, it really grinds you down because of its cold temperatures, because of the dryness of the air, the strong winds. It's very, very demanding of you. Once you get to base camp, you've got a series of about 4 camps between base camp and the summit. And so you're progressing camp by camp. The higher you get up the mountain, the more sort of severe the terrain is getting. You're then entering places where you've got steeper ridges, steeper climbs. The temperature's getting colder. The altitude's really hitting you. You have got other teams. So for us, that was useful because after 8 days of being on our own, now we've got other people and we can sort of tap into their knowledge and their, you know, insights about the conditions on the mountain. So that was really invaluable. And there were tracks to follow as well. So that's a bit reassuring when there's big crevasses around. But I think having that first 8 days approach helped us get really, really slick so that once we're on the mountain, we felt like we were flying. And so we got up to camp 4, which takes some teams like a week to 10 days. We got up there in 3.5 days. So we absolutely flew up there. You know, we're passing teams, we're feeling super strong. And, you know, really, really slick. And we'd got everything dialed in by that point, which you need to have because I think the cold holds you to account. You know, it holds you accountable. Yeah. You can't mess around.
I think anywhere, obviously, I got taught in the Marines, although I didn't do a proper Norway, it was like kind of the saying the guys I spoke to, it's like being in Norway. So you kind of, your admin needs to be on point so much just because, and it can be so dangerous when it's so cold.
Yeah, absolutely. It needs to be dialed in. And the higher up the mountain you get, the narrower the margins for error. For instance, you know, you take your gloves off near the summit, you're going to get frostbite within 2 minutes. You know, one misstep on certain parts of that terrain, you're going off the side of the mountain and potentially dragging your teammates with you. So everything's got a consequence, and so we needed to be really slick. And so we felt really good. We got up to Camp 4, and that's at about 4,300 meters. To set the scene, this is kind of the last safe haven on the mountain. You're surrounded, you're in a bit of a bowl, and it's quite protected from the weather. It's very cold. It's getting down to about -20 now. But this is kind of the place to wait it out for the summit window. After that, you've got one more high camp, which is about 5,200 meters, and then you've got the summit at about 6,200 meters. And while we're sat in camp, this 6-day storm blows in on the higher mountain. And so then we're hearing stories of people higher up the mountain who were like sitting in their tents for days on end, bracing them against the storm, who were getting frostbite. We heard of these guys falling and breaking legs and getting helicoptered off. You're hearing all these horror stories from higher on the mountain, and now you're thinking, we really need to ready ourselves. Well, the big sort of event at that moment in time was right next to our camp, there's this steeper ice wall. You climb up that, and then you're onto a ridge which will take you to the high camp. One day we were doing like a shuttle run of gear, so we were going to climb up there, drop our gear somewhere, come back down, just as a bit of acclimatization. And we climbed up this up this steep slope, and that morning we were totally cut off for the entire trip on Denali, other than our satellite devices where we could send brief messages, but no phone signal. So I'd sent a couple of messages to my 3-year-old daughter that morning, and we were just talking about some of the things we were going to do when I got back. And then I remember we spent the day climbing up this steep hillside, absolutely blowing, redlining up this steep 50-degree slope on fixed lines now, with heavy rucksacks, on the limit, and going at quite a steady pace. And then we got to the top of this ridge. Now you're on really consequential terrain, like the mountains dropping off at either side. It's cloudy, it's cold, it's windy, and it's only going to get harder. And then we heard this helicopter flying from the top of the mountain, and it flew out of the clouds. And then below this helicopter, there's a stretcher carrying a body, and sort of we all saw this thing, and we all probably knew what it meant, but nobody said anything in that moment because that's not the place for a discussion like that. And we all, I think, subconsciously knew that. So nobody said anything, but I just saw this thing, essentially, which did turn out, unfortunately, to be a climber who'd fallen to his death. Who'd been solo on the mountain, he'd fallen to his death. Oh. And he was now being helicoptered off the mountain. And at that time, there's only about 150, 200 climbers on the mountain. And one of them was seen just being flown off. And that morning, I'd been speaking to my 3-year-old daughter about the things we're going to do together when I get home. And so for me, that was a real moment where sort of reality hit, and all of the fine margins that exist on the mountain like that. Because all that guy had done is made a misstep and slipped.
Yeah.
And so, I have no shame in saying this, but I said to the team, I'm just not feeling it today. I'm not feeling it because my head had gone into the wrong place by that point. And as I said that, I felt maybe they weren't feeling it as well. And so we planted our kit and went back to the tents. And then it was, in a sense, we had to make the best of that situation. And what we did in that moment was, we spent the evening really talking about how we need to operate from here on, like zero complacency, making good decisions, making sure that we're trusting each other absolutely, that we're not making any ego or emotional-based decisions, that it's all through logic and experience, and that we're really not taking any unnecessary risks.
Did that feel like it got serious? I'm not saying it wasn't serious, but that was the point where it was like, right, okay.
Definitely, yeah, 100%. Yeah, that's when I think for me, definitely, I think for the rest of the team as well, we all felt like, right, now it's game on. Like, now we really need to concentrate.
Was there a point as well that you kind of think, this has been such an unbelievable trip just for you personally at that point, and you think we might not even get to summit? The weather comes in and you think, God, was there a bit of that think, God, this all could be for nothing if we don't get a bit of luck with the weather? Or
yeah, because as much planning as you do, you're still at the mercy of the mountain.
Yeah.
I think you can't go to a place like this and think, for me, mountains aren't to be conquered. My perception is that the mountain is the boss, And you've got to it's more of a dance with the mountain than a battle, than a fight, because you've got to wait.
Yeah,
because if you're trying to battle and fight the mountain, you're not going to win. because the mountain's got avalanches, it's got freezing temperatures, it's got storms, it's merciless. It doesn't care who you are, how experienced you are. And some of the most experienced mountaineers of all time have lost their lives in the mountains. You know, I'm all too aware of it. I've seen it happen to people I've known. And so, you know, we knew that we had to be making really good decisions. But yeah, I was also conscious that maybe the mountain won't give us the opportunity. Maybe we'll face a two-week storm. We won't have chance. And so what I came back to is actually one of the very first things that I'd said to the team on our very first group call, where I'd shared that the number one goal of this expedition was to get everyone home safely. The number two goal was to climb the mountain. And I think just having that straight right from the start, that then filters into all the decision making. And everyone was fully on board with that.
Yeah.
So that was our thinking.
Wow. So when that kind of kicks in and it gets serious, then, you know, you've got the last couple of camps to go. I mean, what's the kind of next few days look like then?
So then it's a waiting game. You're waiting for this storm to move on. You're watching the weather. You're chatting to other teams. You're listening on the radio every night. The Rangers are putting out weather reports. So you're sort of waiting. You're planning. You're thinking about the days ahead. Eventually, the weather cleared, and we'd made our own group decision that we were going to make a push for the high camp and then for the summit. And it was interesting. As we woke up that morning, a lot of the other teams were doing the same. So there's a few other teams by now on the mountain. So we progressed on up to the high camp. We packed away just the bare minimum now because we'd be carrying it up to 5,200 meters. So we have much heavier bags right now, going into real high altitude, really feeling the low oxygen. And
for anyone who hasn't been up a mountain as well, I think I've went to about 6,000 meters. I've went to, and you're literally out of breath, tying your shoelaces on you. You are. It's never mind carrying all the kit you're carrying. It's so hard to explain for anyone who's not experienced it.
Yeah, it's almost like you're doing a 100-meter sprint constantly. You're just, you know, you're redlining. And so everything takes longer, everything's slower. We've also got to be super slick, super efficient. And eventually we get up to high camp after about 9 hours, what was it, about 6 or 8 hours, I think, to get up to high camp. And then, you know, now you're at 5,200 meters. That's the highest we've been on the mountain. You're in this exposed place, so you've just got to hope that, you know, the weather report is right now, and you've got to have faith in the weather. Usually what you do is build snow walls around your tent, but here the snow is like solid ice. And just the idea of chiseling into this solid ice to build a snow wall, absolutely exhausted, knackered. You know, we're taking it in shifts to 5 minutes each. We bumped into some Navy SEALs who we befriended, actually, and they lent us a couple of their, you know, I'm glad they carried it and not us, but they brought some steel gardener's shovels up there. And so we're using these steel shovels because our kind of lightweight snow shovels just wouldn't get into this ice. So they'd lent us those. We built this rudimentary kind of snow wall, and then it's kind of hunkering down. Now there's 4 of us into this 4-man tent. By the way, like a 4-man tent, usually better for 3. Always take one off the size of the tent. So now we're lying there. One of the air mats is broken, so we've got 3 mats. We've put those sort of horizontally and then laid the other way, if that makes sense. So we're very, very cozy in there. We'd spent the next day sort of just acclimatizing, and then we decided that we're going to go on sort of a second day up at high camp. And so now we really need to be dialed in. You know, we need to have a good plan. We need to make sure...
What goes in for the summit day then?
For the summit day. So now we're preparing ourselves for the summit. We know that the weather's looking pretty good, but you still need to have contingencies. Summit day is a big, gruesome day. You know, we knew we'd be spending a lot of time on the mountain and that we'd be entering temperatures of -30 or even below. So it's going to be exceptionally cold.
And for you personally, Matt, have you saying about your body, you just went on the bike earlier on, but what's your body like now? Is it, I mean, you must be knackered at this point.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of, there's definitely some fatigue. I'm sure like my body was fully ready for a rest, but equally I was probably in the condition of my life. You know, I just cycled 42 days doing 95 miles a day. My sort of endurance is at an all-time high, and you know, I am feeling good physically, but the altitude is still the unknown, and that's the thing that can still get you.
I wonder if any of the guys that came up, whether they thought that they couldn't really moan about being tired, given the fact that, you know, you just cycled 50 to 40 odd days, you know.
Yeah, maybe. But I mean, the huge credit to the lads, because they arrived in amazing condition, every one of them. And I was unsure. You never know, what sort of pace everyone's going to be at. Everyone was, really pushing the envelope, really strong.
Yeah. So summit day, I mean that.
Yep.
I know myself, I think summit days can be long days, but I've never done them out as hard as this one. I mean, what was that like?
Yeah, so summit day, I mean, the first thing you need to cross is this steep slope. You traverse across a slope, which is known as the Autobahn. And this has been the scene of many, many accidents over the years. And this is where the Japanese climber, had fallen a few days before, the one who we'd seen being flown off the mountain. So we'd spent the previous day kind of looking at this slope and just trying not to let it get in your head. I mean, one thing that he had against him was he was on his own. So you can't rope to anyone. You can't really protect yourself that much. Or your only protection are your crampons and your ice axe, which when he did it was bare ice and at 45 degrees. So you take a slip and you're basically not going to stop yourself. We were roped together, so that gives you a layer of security. It snowed a bit, so now we could make steps in the snow. There's fixed protection, which means you've got stakes and ice screws in the snow with carabiners, so we could clip to that, which the ranger had put in, which is like a blessing. Now we could protect ourselves on that section, but still we needed to concentrate. You might not be killed by falling, but you could certainly really injure yourself and pull your teammates down. So we had to really concentrate. That took up the first maybe couple of hours on the climb. We set off first, but another team ended up going ahead of us, a small team. So we could follow them for the first bit up the mountain and just trying to move fast because in the morning, absolutely freezing cold. Fingers are freezing, feet are freezing. Your mustache and your beard is frozen, got ice on it. You then push on after the Autobahn. Then you've got a section of other sort of slopes and short ridges. You've got some crevasse crossings. And then eventually you get to about 6,000 meters. You got a stretch called the football field, which is this sort of flattish area. And then a final steep climb. By now, the fatigue is really, really kicking in. And, we are all fit guys, fit individuals. But that last slope was an absolute killer. We're doing 10, 20 steps and then just crashing into the snow and just trying to keep our legs moving. Absolutely on the limit. You're so fatigued. And then eventually we hit this ridge. And this is the last bit now to get to the summit. And finally you can see the summit ahead of you. You got maybe 400 meters or so along this ridge. That took well over an hour. So you're going 400 meters an hour, and that feels like a 100-meter sprint. On this ridge, it's consequential. If you go off the edge of that, you're in big trouble. You're going to pull the whole team off the mountain. And now, you've got to concentrate. You've got to really, really focus on where you're putting your feet. Are you clipping in? Are you using the rope effectively as a team? We have a couple of breaks. We keep pushing on. And I think finally it was about 100 meters from the summit that I looked at this summit and the sun was just bouncing off it. And that was the first time in 64 days that I'd allowed myself to believe that we were going to get there and to stand on that summit. And so we keep pushing on. And I think Aaron had gone on, like absolute credit to him. He'd gone on, summited on his own, and he was ahead of us, taking photos. Unbelievable. The three of us were like sat together, and I think we all had this moment about 100 meters from the summit where we knew it was in the bag. Like, we knew it was in the bag. And, I think we all had some tears of emotion behind our goggles at that point because we all had our own reasons for being there. And then we pushed on up onto the summit, and just this absolute incredible feeling, is indescribable. It was this deep satisfaction. It was this immense pride of doing it with this team who come together with, zero issues, worked so well together as a team, functioned amazingly well together, made all the right decisions, made this thing happen where there were a million and one reasons why it couldn't have happened. And so we spent about an hour on the summit, and it was just incredible. An hour up there. Yeah, I checked back because I didn't believe it, but I checked back my Garmin recording, and we spent an hour on that summit. Just looking around, looking at the views. The Navy SEALs had got up there. We beat them to the summit, which was nice.
I mean, I've seen the photos. I'll get a few of them we can put on the pod for people watching. But photos are just insane.
Yeah.
I mean, I can understand why you will have spent an hour up there because it doesn't look like you could ever get bored of the views. It was...
No. You really couldn't. It's just this dreamlike place. And so just taking it all in, it feels like you're in another world. And one of the great things is, that the only way to get on top of a mountain like that is through your own hard work and effort. It's one of the few places on earth you couldn't even get a helicopter up there. You couldn't get a plane up there. You've got to get up there with your own physical effort, which is, it's got to be earned, and that's a good feeling.
Yeah, I mean, I always think it's a crazy feeling as well when you're the highest, human in the whole of America at that moment in time.
Yeah.
And for you personally, you were at the lowest point.
Yeah.
60 odd days. So what was it? 64 days. Was
64 days from start to finish.
It's insane.
Yeah.
Insane.
It's incredible. Yeah. Incredible feeling.
Mate, congratulations again.
Thank you.
So you then come down, obviously coming down, I'm guessing, hoping it's a lot easier than getting up. But I saying that though, with the sled, I mean, I've seen the guys when they've been out doing it. That sled and skiing down, I mean.
Yeah, very, very hard. I mean, first of all, so we didn't have the sleds on the summit day. That would have been, wild. But so summit day, turning back, that's when, for all of us, the fatigue really hit. And now we're just, like, on our limits. We're kind of absolutely knackered. It feels like you could fall asleep standing up for all of us. And so we're taking energy gels, we're taking paracetamol. We're almost out of water between the three of us. But you just need to fight to concentrate because you still need to come down. You need to cross the Autobahn, that dangerous section, get back to camp. And so that took maybe 4 or 5 hours. Aaron had skied off it, which was like remarkable.
Skied off
the summit, all the way down through high camp, down to camp 4, which was just a phenomenal achievement. And so he was waiting down there. For the rest of us, it left the three of us kind of tethered together. And we spent 2 days, descending back to the camp to meet Aaron. Mm-hmm. Then we kitted up again, and that's when we re-encountered the sleds. And now it gets hard because you're trying to walk and then ski downhill with a heavy sled attached to you. And as soon as you start going downhill, this thing is like a pendulum. It just races in front of you. And there were a couple of tricky moments where...
Sorry, maybe I'll pick it up there then. You alright, mate? Sorry, mate, you're...
Coming to fix the bus, see we set 310 and 2.
Okay.
Did I come here?
Yeah. Look, no worries, mate. Alright. Nice one, lad, yeah. Sorry about that, mate.
Yeah.
It's shot us to go down, we just pick it up.
Yeah. I know where I was up to.
I'll do it, mate.
Sorry, mate. All right. So once we got back to Camp 4, then we had one last final push down. And actually, you're still crossing some sort of consequential terrain. And the way we worked it, we sort of had the sled in between us as a team. Right. Well, that means that the back guy, as you're descending, is carrying all the weight of what is now like a 40-kilo sled because we combined our kit. And they're being, really pulled down the mountain, basically walking on blue ice in sections where you're just fully trusting your crampons and your purchase on the ice. So again, there's no margin for error. Eventually we did get closer to base camp and then things got a lot easier. There's no real dangers there. And so we could strip down to just our own sleds and we're just skiing back into base camp. And for me, that was the euphoric moment. It maybe wasn't the summit where it was pure euphoria because I knew we needed to get down. But that final ski down into base camp, now we're not roped together. We've got our own sleds. It's easy terrain. You got the mountains next to you. It's job done. Now it's just time to get down and get the ski plane out of there.
I guess that feeling as well, the pressure, like you said, we mentioned before, you've had those lads bringing them together. It's kind of on you, that feeling that you've all done it. And most importantly, what was your main priority?
Yeah.
Everyone's safe and sound off the mountain.
Exactly.
I mean, that must have been,
Yeah, phenomenal.
I can understand why that almost felt that was the feeling you got then, rather than the summit, because again, that I've said it a few times, I just think that the pressure that you put yourself under from start to finish, other people's lives in your hands, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that was the moment where it's job done. And the most satisfying thing, in a way, it wasn't, of course, it was great to complete the journey and reach the summit, but it was, it came back to that style point. It was the way we'd done it. It was the way everything, all that planning had been worth it. We'd made all the right decisions. Nothing had gone majorly wrong. I even had, I got back and some people were saying, it almost you made it look easy, which I think it is the best compliment, really, because it was exceptionally hard. Nobody's done it for 25 years. And I think that is, all credit to the amazing team that had come on board and everything they'd done to make it a success.
Oh, mate, all of you is incredible. Did you allow yourself then a few beers when you got back down to civilization?
We certainly did. We got back to the ski plane. It was so surreal because that morning we'd still have been at 4,500 meters. We'd got all the way back to base camp in one day, which normally would be a couple of days' journey, and just got the last ski plane out of there as a team, got it loaded up, and he followed our route, which we'd taken in, which was really cool. So that's where we crossed the river, that's where we saw the bear prints. Flew back down. So in the evening, we landed in Talkeetna, this little town in northern Alaska, which is the proper climbers town. And we didn't actually have any accommodation sorted, so it was right straight to the bar. Then dumped all the gear. We didn't even have a chance to freshen up. We'd spent 22 days without a shower on the mountain, stinking. Of course, got into this bar and just drank the night away. Really, loads of climbers there, great atmosphere. Amazing night, big feed, eating everything we could get our hands on. Civilization again. One thing is we did not want to check our phones because we'd had 22 days off grid, and so phones were away. We spent the whole day this whole evening without phones. It was just, it was so good. Such a good feeling.
I mean, that's a whole discussion in itself, isn't it? Just that idea of shutting off for 22 days, no phone. I mean, that must have been liberating as well.
100%. That was what we all said, that was one of the best things about this expedition. 22 days. And, for me, it talked to me about the power of focus, because you're taking 4 very experienced, skilled people with one task and with 0 distractions. And for me, that was the power of what can be achieved when you have absolute focus on your goal. I don't think it would have been the same if we were on Instagram every night, if we were getting messages all the time, if we were on FaceTime. It just would not have been the same. And so we had undivided focus on our task. And it's funny because, as I said, nobody wanted to even look at their phone when we got back. We were in this amazing bubble. And it was special, really.
Shows what a great job you've done with picking those people as well. I mean, what was that bond like then by the end of the trip?
By the end of the trip, these people feel like your brothers. You feel like you could go to war with them. You have absolute, and you do trust each other with your lives on the mountain. So you create this incredible bond, and we've of course stayed in close contact. We've met up since, and nobody can take that experience away from us. I think experiences like this, or any big sort of life challenge or experience, it's one of the great things of it, versus say like material goods and possessions and cars and houses and all the rest of it. It can't be taxed. It can't be stolen from you. It's always going to be there as a part of your life experience, which is just incredibly special. And so, we've just got this incredible bond now. Really, really amazing.
No, totally, mate. One thing I am interested in as well, how long do you give yourself when you come back until you start saying, right, the next one?
Yeah.
There's 5 more to do.
Yeah, I mean, coming back is sort of a journey in itself. And I think you go through a process, and definitely there's a bit of a dip. There is a bit.
I was going to ask about that because, again, again, it's nothing compared to yourself. After I done my 10K record, it was great for about a week or 2.
Yeah.
And then I was just like, almost so demotivated. I don't think I ran for a couple of months.
Yeah.
Which sounds crazy, but I was just like, done it now.
Yeah, it was the same with me. And kind of I got back, I'm in the shape of my life. And yet I'd had all this focus and all this energy on one task for months and months. It's something I've been dreaming about for 10 years, and now it's over. Now everybody in the team's gone their own separate ways, living their own separate lives. You're back in normality. You're dealing with the ordinary stresses that, what could be seen as stresses in normal life. You're deciding what sandwich to buy at the local shop or whatever. Nothing has the same consequence. And so that is definitely a readjustment. Yeah, it was a while.
I always remember when I got back from Iraq, and it was my only one wobble I ever had from leaving the military, and it was around Christmas time. I remember being in the city centre and everyone was rushing around getting Christmas presents, and I'd got back a couple of days from before from Iraq. I remember becoming really angry with people.
Yeah.
And I went and met my dad for a beer, and I just said, to my dad, what the fuck? People not understand what's going on. Like, literally, I was there yesterday, you know what? And my dad kind of had to say to me, look, people are worrying about, paying the mortgage, or worrying about getting Christmas presents sorted for the children. Not everyone can think about what you've just done last week. Now, I know you wasn't at war, but at the same time, there must be that feeling for yourself thinking, what are people doing? Like, do people realise that there's another world out here and you can do... Yeah, it's tough, isn't it?
There is that, yeah. And I'm sure that you, as you say, you've experienced that yourself in a big way. And it is, nobody can understand that. And I think you've just got to accept it. And I think that's where the brotherhood and the bond is so important.
You can rely on other people to talk to those experiences.
Yeah. And if you can't speak to, other friends and family, you've got that team.
No, totally.
I have no doubt that it's the same in the military.
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah. Obviously, you come back, see family, and I mean, that must have been amazing seeing your wife and your kids when she got back.
Yeah, incredible feeling. Incredible feeling walking through the airport, and there my kids are with a sign "Welcome home," and seeing my wife, and just incredible. Yeah, amazing to be able to see them and to do. People often ask me, what it is I miss on these expeditions, and it's not like anything lavish or anything spectacular. It's the simple things. It's being able to go into the park with my kids. It's being able to, do all those simple things that I'd really missed. So it reframes everything for you. Everything feels more precious, more valuable. I think we take things for granted a lot in the Western culture because we have so much. And when you strip that away and then return to it, you really see how valuable it is and how fortunate we are. So that. Yeah, sometimes it takes those hard moments to really see what you should be grateful for.
Oh, yeah. I have it when I have a problem with my prosthetic leg, and I have a couple of days with them on crutches, and then the second I can walk again, I'm like, feel like it's the best thing in the world just to be able to walk. So I definitely mean all those little things. So you got 5 more to go.
Yep.
5 more of these challenges. What is going to be the next one?
So the next one is South America. Okay. So, we'll be heading down to Aconcagua, where you were. And the cycle, so again, it's a cycle and a climb. Yeah. So the cycle will start down near Patagonia, and then it's about 1,600-mile ride all the way through Argentina to reach near Mendoza, and then go and climb the mountain.
Need to put in a few days for some wine and steak when you're 100% planning that. I have him with a wine and steak. Wow, so when are you hoping to do this now?
So January. So it's about 2 months away.
What, is in 2 months?
2 months away. Yeah. Wow. So deep into the planning right now, finalising those last logistics. Fortunately, it's not as complex logistically as North America, which had all the remoteness and it's a bit simpler to put together. That said, Aconcagua is a big mountain, as you know about. It's a big mountain, cold, windy, stormy. So definitely cannot take it for granted.
And are you getting a team together again on this one, or is it going to be just yourself, or...?
Yes, so I'm in the process of finalising the team. Mike will be joining me again. Unfortunately, Ryan can't join me. I was speaking to Aaron about it as well, seeing if he'll come on board. So we will be getting a team together. We want to do it in a similar style as well, where sort of minimal outside support in our own sort of independent team, and being responsible for the decision making along the way as well.
Yeah, mate, it's the coldest. I mean, you will have no doubt been in colder in Denali. It's the coldest I have ever been in my life.
Yeah.
Got frost nip in my little finger. Thought I was going to, thought I was going to lose it. It was just, we got about 200 metres to the summit. And Harry Taylor, I don't know if you ever come across him, it was a guy, he just called it and said, look, unfortunately, lads, it's not happening this year. And we turned back, but it was, the toughest, hardest mountain I've ever been on.
Yeah.
So no doubt that'll bring all these challenges for you.
Yeah, I'm sure it will. And I've heard many people say the same thing, So although it's maybe not the same technical difficulties like the cold, the wind, the altitude, it'll be the highest I've ever been as well. So again, it's stepping into the unknown. And, it sounds like in your case, that was the right call. I think, again, you can't go into it just expecting to get there. No, we've just got to have the contingency days. And
I like the idea, the idea you said about having a dance with a mountain, because, there was guys when we didn't actually summit who did go up, and a lot of them lost fingers.
Really?
Yeah, they were Argentinian policemen, and a group of them went up, and they decided to crack on, and got a few serious injuries. So,
wow.
Yeah. With regards to you've come back, I mean, we said this at the start, how difficult it can be with sponsors.
Yeah.
Knowing that you've done 2 now, are you finding it's kind of gotten the ball rolling and people are now more aware of you and what you're about? Is it getting easier getting sponsors now?
It definitely is, yeah. Now I've really felt like I've proved the concept. North America was a huge challenge, big unknown. But I got a lot of press out of that expedition, so that all helps. And now I can go to future sponsors. I have got a TV production company I'm working with now as well, so that's another interesting angle. So it's definitely easier to have those conversations. It's still not without its challenges, but fortunately South America is not as expensive as North America.
Because what are we talking about on these trips? I mean, Africa and North America. I mean, what budget-wise? I mean, ballpark. What are you?
So North America was around 25 to 30 grand, something like that, for the entire expedition. Africa was a lot cheaper, and I was running an expedition to Kilimanjaro at the time, so that sort of funded itself. South America won't be too expensive, but once you start looking at the Everest and Antarctica legs, you're talking, 6-figure sums. So that's where, intentionally they'll be left towards the end to continue to build that momentum. Certainly what I've found is that you're almost better approaching the corporate angle rather than the outdoor brands and things like that. And, going after those bigger potential sponsors. So, it never stops. The networking, the outreach, the conversations, it never stops.
I just love your whole kind of career now, though, because it's something like, you go and do these amazing challenges. You then create amazing stories and, huge life lessons of building teams, working in teams, high pressure situations, achievements. And then you can then got all this wealth of experience, then go into the corporate world, tell those stories, drum up, a kind of flavour to get involved in it, which can then set you up for the next one.
Yeah.
It's a great kind of way to live your life, and especially doing what you enjoy as well.
Yeah, it's I said before, there's no blueprint for this. So there's been a lot of trial and error, but I feel now I've found a place, I've found a sort of a challenge where it's all coming together nicely and everything works, it bounces off one another. The bigger challenges can land those bigger conversations, can get that more press attention.
Yeah.
And so it's now in this kind of virtuous cycle, I suppose, where, things are working well together.
And you deserve it, like you said at the start. There's no blueprint for it. You can't just thinking, this is what I want to do. I'm going to have a go at it. Let's see how it works. So I think you deserve it all that's coming to you.
I appreciate it. It's been a long journey. And there's been many years where, you're basically living from expedition to expedition, wondering if you should go and get a real job again. And so been a lot of doubts over the years, but I mean, I think, it is just if you keep chipping away at something for long enough, you keep trying new things, you're not afraid of the unknown, and you back yourself critically, because there's so many times when nobody else is going to back you. You need to back yourself. Then eventually, I think, you start to see the fruits of your labour.
And on the back burner then, are you putting, like you said at the start, you do expeditions for clients. Is that kind of on the back burner at the moment? Is it why you focus on this, or are you still taking people out?
Yeah, so that's sort of slightly on the back burner. I'm still doing some expeditions. So this is through my company, Wild Edge. I just got back from another trip up Kilimanjaro, which was
when I took your mum?
Took my mum up there, which was a really special experience. So I'm doing a few less. I'm a bit more selective on the expeditions I'm leading, the sort of commercial expeditions. But it's still a big passion, facilitating other people's dreams. That's what that's all about. Seeing them go through those hard moments and then, succeed and triumph. That in itself is another big passion of mine.
What was it like with your mum then, getting up Kilimanjaro?
Yeah, incredible, because she'd had her own health battles and she'd had brain surgery 1 year ago. Had some real sort of health scares, spent a long time rebuilding her fitness. Turned 60 this year. A few days later, ran her first ultramarathon. So like phenomenal, 30-odd mile ultra. So spent a lot of time getting fit. And then, decided to come on an expedition with me and climb Kilimanjaro. So spent months and months doing a training for that. And then eventually we got up to the summit together, which was just incredible experience. So quite emotional. But and seeing how empowered she feels after doing that. It's such a special experience. So it's sort of a reminder that, I have spent a lot of time away from home, but we really need to, life is short. We need to cherish those moments with our loved ones, because that is the absolute gold in life, isn't it?
Oh, 100%. And I can see obviously where you get it from then, your mother. I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Mate, I feel honoured that, being able to sit to you for a couple of hours, mate. I mean, what you've done, again, without kind of blowing too much smoke up your ass, you are the type of person, and why I started the podcast a few years ago, because I wanted to speak to these people who, like you say, back themselves, have these big dreams. And it's something I always say in my talk to young children. I say, you know, if your dreams don't scare you, you're not dreaming big enough. You know, when you tell your friends, your teachers what you want to do with your life, if they don't look at you like you're a weirdo, you're probably not dreaming big enough. And you are probably one of those people where when you said, this is what I want to do, people have thought, what the fuck's this guy? Do you know what I mean? So I love being around people like yourself, mate. I feel you're kind of on a massive trajectory, and I can't wait to see, no doubt, on Netflix or on wherever. I mean, the sky's the limit really for you. So
thanks so much, Andy. It's been an absolute pleasure. Really appreciate it.
Really enjoyed it. And if anyone wants to get in touch on Instagram and stuff,
so come and follow along on at Oli_France. You know, I'll be on there. I'll be sharing the future legs and lots more to come. But I really appreciate your support. You know, I appreciate your support throughout the challenge. This is kind of, as I've said, this is building up from the ground up. You know, I've heard all about your story. Ryan told me, you know, throughout one night in our tent on freezing Denali, I heard your story, which is in itself is incredibly inspiring.
Well, thank you very much.
So yeah, huge privilege to work with you and to have this conversation.
Yeah, I'm already thinking about speaking gigs, and I know a lot of people who'd really benefit from you. So we'll chat in a minute off air. But yeah, I think you're amazing, and keep doing what you're doing.
Thanks, mate.
Hope you enjoyed that episode with Ollie. Please don't forget to like, share, comment. I hope you enjoy.